It's 6 in the morning, just before sunrise. We are at an elevation of 3,600 meters, or about 12,000 feet. The temperature outside is hovering a few degrees above freezing. We have already been up for 2 hours, standing outside in the cold, because for the last 2 hours, this has been our view. We are all wearing about 5 layers each, standing on the side of a dormant volcano, watching one of the world's most active volcanoes, Volcán de Fuego, erupt, throwing bright orange lava into the night sky. It's a mesmerizing spectacle, difficult to put into words, but the experience didn't start out so well. After about 4 hours of grueling hiking straight uphill, we arrived at base camp to find this view. Visibility was almost zero and we were dejected, thinking all the hard work was for nothing. But let me start at the beginning. We are in Guatemala, a beautiful tropical country in Central America, famous for its many volcanoes, stunning lakes, beautiful colonial architecture, incredible nature landscapes, and a close connection to its indigenous Mayan heritage. It's quite a remarkable place, and in this video, I'll show you some of the highlights of a week-long trip I took with Sushita here last fall. We will visit Antigua, the stunning former capital of Spain's colonial empire in Central America. We will spend the night in the clouds on a volcano called Acatenango. We will visit the deepest lake in Central America, and finally, since this is a channel about biking places, I'll spend some time attempting to ride a bike on some cobblestones. Hopefully by the end of this video, it'll be easy to see why Guatemala has become such a popular destination for nature lovers and outdoor enthusiasts. The trip started in Antigua, the old capital of colonial Guatemala. It's about an hour's drive from the current capital, which is Guatemala City, in the southwestern portion of the country. Antigua is a bustling city of cobblestone streets and colorful Spanish-style architecture. The city's charm is punctuated by 3 enormous volcanoes easily visible for most parts of town. The closest and most prominent is Volcán de Agua, just south of Antigua's downtown. It is dormant just like the largest of the 3, Acatenango, which is a little way southwest of the city. Right next to Acatenango is the smaller peak of Volcán Fuego, which is very much an active volcano, spewing lava and ash into the air every 15 minutes or so. There are no tall buildings in Antigua, so it's easy to observe the eruptions from most rooftops in town. One of the reasons Antigua maintained its historic beauty, and also the reason it is no longer the capital of the country, is the area it's located in is very prone to earthquakes. A huge earthquake leveled the city in 1773, destroying much of the oldest infrastructure in town. Many beautiful churches were reduced to rubble. To this day, many have been left largely the way they were found, with enormous stones scattered on the ground. Some have been partially restored and can be toured as museums. It's quite eerie to walk into a historic church, with detailed carvings on the walls to find pigeons inside, and above you only remains of ancient arches against the blue sky. There are many of these churches all around the city, each with their own unique details. One of the most prominent churches in Antigua today is this yellow one called La Merced. It is located in the north of the city and was just recently built when the earthquake struck. Amazingly, it remained largely undamaged. It has a rooftop which can be visited with great views of the Santa Catalina Arch, another remnant of the city from before the earthquake, and one of the most recognizable symbols of the city today. The arch was built in 1694 to allow nuns to walk between a convent on one side of the street to a school on the other side and avoid being seen in public. The arch is a hugely popular photography destination in the city and is a busy place before sunrise to well after sunset. Guatemala is a very religious place, and we witnessed a procession happening one evening. A group of men carried a large float with a band playing behind them. One of the side trips we took from Antigua was to an outdoor park called Jocotenango. It is loosely themed around hobbits with tiny houses sprinkled around the place. It's less of a theme park though, and more of a nature park with terrific views of the volcanoes and many scenic spots to take photos. I was worried it might be a bit of a tourist trap, but found I actually enjoyed it very much. After a few days of exploring the city, we got up one morning at the break of dawn to go on an unmissable adventure. We both did a lot of research about it beforehand and were definitely a little nervous arriving to the tour agency headquarters. We had heard that this is one of the most challenging hikes people had done in their entire life. It was going to be a steep vertical ascent up a dormant volcano over the course of several hours to watch an active volcano erupt. The hike is just under 4 miles or 6 kilometers with an elevation gain of 1,125 meters or 3,690 feet. The temperature at the top can be as low as freezing. We knew it was going to be a huge challenge, but we also convinced ourselves we had to do it. We were driven in large vans to a small village at the foothills of Acatenango called La Soledad and started climbing. At first we mostly passed farmland, but quickly we entered a tropical forest and were engulfed in thick fog. I was doing well in the middle of the group at first, but as we walked the elevation started to affect me and I slowed down considerably. I realized living at sea level and not really traveling much to high mountains, this was the highest elevation I'd ever been at. After about 4 hours of grueling hiking, we finally arrived at base camp. It was then that the reality started to sink in, that the clouds weren't going anywhere. Tall volcanoes often have microclimate that only affects certain areas. Clouds and mist comes and goes unpredictably throughout the day. After one of the most difficult physical exertions of our lives, we were staring at a sheet of white. Many of us from the group huddled inside the common area at base camp playing cards. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew some of the clouds out of the way and we caught what might have been a glimpse of something. Everyone ran outside, but the view was gone in an instant. We all went back inside. It happened a few more times, but the clouds never fully parted. We ate our supper around sunset and turned in for the night, hoping for better luck in the morning. There were additional excursion options, and people were getting up at all different odd hours. We got up around 4 in the morning, hoping to see the lava, and were not disappointed this time. The video footage I got was pretty grainy, but the long exposure shots I got with my 50mm lens tell a much better story. I especially love this photo because it shows the flow of lava heading down the side of the volcano and the line of headlamps from hikers going up towards it to see the lava up close. Sushita and I were happy to stay at base camp and observe from a safe distance. As the sun rose behind Volcán de Agua, which was also visible from up here, we finally got a good view of where we really were. We saw all the layers of mountains from the Guatemalan highlands leading all the way out to the Pacific coast. The views were breathtaking and made all the effort worth it. Once everyone returned from the side trips, we packed up and headed back down the mountain. We got to experience the views we should have seen the day before, just in the reverse. We also had a few furry companions for part of the walk as well, encouraging us along. The walk down was much quicker but still challenging and our legs were dead tired by the end. We finished the trip in the same tiny cafe we started in La Soledad before being driven back to the city. This was truly one of the most memorable travel experiences I have ever had, and I would recommend it to anyone who comes to Guatemala. We went with local tour operator called Waco and Charlie, who were great, but there are several others who also provide a similar experience and have their own small base camps at the volcano. They provided all the gear we needed, and several guides on the day of the hike who stayed with us throughout and cooked meals for us at the base camp. Most people don't travel to Guatemala with winter coats and numerous layers, so it was nice to have these things along with hiking poles and a few other necessities provided for us. I've read of folks doing the hike by themselves without guides, but I personally wouldn't risk it. The hike was definitely every bit as challenging as advertised, and does require a decent level of fitness. But many folks who made it to the top, ourselves included, were far from seasoned athletes, so I think most people would be able to handle it. Feel free to ask any questions if you're thinking of doing it. I'll be happy to fill in any details. After the hike, we returned to Antigua and were happy to just rest and relax after the exertion of the prior days. The following morning, we arranged a shuttle to take us to the shores of Lake Atitlan, one of the most beautiful lakes in the world. It's the deepest lake in Central America, filled with pristine blue water, and like many places in Guatemala, is surrounded by volcanoes again. It was formed by an enormous volcanic eruption in prehistoric times. Today, it's a popular tourist destination with over a dozen small villages to visit and take in the wonders of the lake. It's a bit of a choose-your-own-adventure when deciding where to stay, because each village has its own personality. Some of the popular ones are San Marcos, which is famous for yoga retreats and a hippie vibe, and San Pedro, which is more of a younger nightlife destination. We chose to stay in Santa Cruz, which is known to be a quieter town with more nature-focused activities. Most trips to Lake Atitlan begin in the busy hub of Panajachel, or Pana as everyone calls it. It's where most shuttles drop visitors off. Most hotels and travel agencies can arrange a shuttle for you, and it's the most practical way to get to and from the lake. The going rate when we were there was around $20. Once in Pana, there are constant boats running to all the rest of the islands, which charge a flat fee during the daytime. The rides we took were pretty quick and very bumpy. A word of advice is to make sure you finish up your days exploring before sunset when the public boats stop operating and private boats charge 10 times as much to do a personal trip. Don't ask me how I know. Most of the hotels and tourist infrastructure tends to be near the shore, while locals live in small, picturesque settlements in the hills. One of the main complaints travelers have about Santa Cruz is there are not many restaurants, and the few that there are require reservations early in the day to accommodate diners. On the flip side, one of my favorite restaurants of the whole trip was located just up the hill in the Mayan village portion of Santa Cruz. It had this spectacular view of the lake, along with terrific food and drinks. It's run by a nonprofit which employs locals and invests proceeds back into the community. It's called Café Sabor Cruceño, and we paid this place a few visits, though only for breakfast. Each time we came, we asked one of the little red tuk-tuk drivers to take us up the hill because our legs were completely destroyed by the hike. It took about a whole day for the soreness to truly kick in, but we found walking nearly impossible, especially downhill for several days. Luckily, the days at the lake didn't require a lot of physical exertion, and we were happy to slowly meander between the towns. In San Marcos, we hired another tuk-tuk driver, Pancho, to take us up to an observation point near one of the famous sunrise hikes, where we took some of these photos. We ended up extending our stay at the lake by one day to give the legs a little more recovery time and spend more time with these views. On our last day in Antigua, just before departing, I felt like I had one bit of unfinished business. I had seen a few organized groups of cyclists rolling around town and researched some popular routes around the area for a future bike trip, but I wanted to get the sense of what riding here felt like before we left. I went to a bike rental agency and rented a fat bike. Fat bikes were the only option because the city is covered in cobblestones. These stones weren't flat and even like some places, but rather jagged and rough. Even though the shoes I was wearing had pretty thick soles, my feet were hurting because the uneven rocks kept poking the soles of my feet from different angles. The bike was able to handle the cobblestones, but it was not much of a treat to ride if I'm being honest. It creaked like crazy and probably weighed more than some of the motorcycles I had seen around town. Nevertheless, I was determined to make the most of my time on two wheels. I rode the bike out to the nearest town, just barely outside of Antigua. I wanted to see the little colorful church in the central square that we passed a few times on our trip outside the city. The town is called Jocotenango, and it has a peaceful little square with kids playing and no other tourists. I rode a little north and decided to stop by a famous coffee plantation. It had a huge barbed wire fence and high security. Once inside, I grabbed a cup of coffee and bought some beans to bring back home. The plantation had a beautiful colonial interior with lots of Spanish arches and rows of coffee plants as far as the eye can see. I completed the loop back to Antigua and dropped the bike off. I definitely know I'll need white tires when I return to do a proper bike tour. All in all, it was a challenging and rewarding trip. We loved staying in Antigua and exploring all the coffee shops, swanky hotels, and rooftop bars around town. It's definitely a bit touristy, and I hope next time I'm in this part of the world, I can explore some more off-the-beaten-path destinations. We wanted to find time to visit Acatenango, but couldn't find time to fit it into our itinerary. Likewise, I'd like to see Livingston and the ruins of Tikal, which I've been wanting to see for a long time. Hopefully I'll be back sometime soon to fill in the gaps. Leave a comment if you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.